Hello, my name is Diana Dalmas, and I'm writing a newsletter on Substack called the Psychedelic Corner. And I'm privileged today to speak with Mark Coakley, who wrote a book that just intrigued me as soon as I found it out on Twitter called Shroom, and it's about Canada's psychedelic pioneers. I learned so much. It was a great read. I also found out about other books that he's written that intrigued me, like Murder Bugs, a love story. Hidden Harvest looks like an amazing book, and Tip and Trade. All of them look like something that will intrigue my interest. Um, so I'd like to just start today, Mark, if you could just introduce yourself and tell a little bit about your background and what started you interested in writing and specifically about psychedelics, but your latest book.
Okay. Um, well, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to be on your show. I think it's great how you're exploring the topic of psychedelics with a personal sort of literary touch, and I admire that.
Thank you.
About myself, I'm a Canadian. I live in Hamilton, which is near Toronto, Ontario. Um, I'm a professional writer. That's what I do, business publications. But my main passion is creative writing. And I've done some nonfiction, like you mentioned, Tip and Trade. That's about insider trading and fraud. Hidden Harvest. That's about back in the old days when cannabis was illegal. You know, it's a historical document now because cannabis has become respectable.
Yes.
And Murder Bugs. That's a science fiction thriller about insects. But we're here to talk about Shroom, which is a nonfiction book. It's portraits of different characters who are important in the psychedelic history of Canada. And I've been writing that over the last year and a half. And I spoke to several people who've either gone through psychedelic therapy or who are involved in companies which are trying to take advantage of the changes of the law that are making psychedelic therapy closer to legal or legal for some people.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. What I was amazed by is the last few books that I've been reading, including with How to Change Your Mind, but Acid Dreams, every book that I've read about psychedelics and history, I haven't realized how much the Canadian aspect was so important here.
Mm-hmm.
We get so insular as a American. I feel like even though I try to read and keep abreast of what's going on around the world just on my own, I
I
still
think you
feel like.
froze just.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? Can you
I can hear you now, but I missed your question. Maybe you can
Oh,
quickly recap your question.
okay. I just I just wanted to tell you that I learned a lot about the psychedelic history in Canada, and I wanted to reflect on
Ah,
how much do you think what happened here with the war on drugs and with our President Nixon and that whole episode, how much do you think we affected Canada's situation with legalization?
interesting. Thank you for your kind words about my book.
Sure.
Um, Richard Nixon is an incredibly important character in the drug history of the world.
Right.
And at that time, the United States was the undisputed cultural superpower. And we had some independence with some of the prime ministers, Lester B. Pearson and Pierre Trudeau. They did assert independence from the United States in some aspects, but not when it came to drug policy. When it
Hmm.
came to drug policy, Canada generally moved lockstep with the United States. So the gradual squeeze of psychedelicity that happened largely under the influence of Richard Nixon in the United States and indirectly in Canada as well. I would
Right.
say that his influence, his pressure on the United States played a huge role in Canada abandoning psychedelic therapy, which we had once been the leader of.
Yes.
Saskatchewan, I honestly believe, should be considered the original capital of psychedelic therapy but that was unfortunately destroyed by the war on drugs started by Richard Nixon.
Yes, I remember hating him when I was growing up. That was I was about 12 at that time. We all hated him, anyone that I knew.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, he did so much damage. I wanted just to tell you too that I was touched by a lot of the selflessness I saw in some of the people that you were able to interview. Um, the person that stands out in my mind, well, Thomas Hartle is being a tremendous character that I loved hearing about. I
Yes.
also I wanted to ask you what it was like to work with people who are in this very delicate time in their life of end of life anxiety. What was it like to get them to open up to you?
That was a very interesting point. And I mean, as a journalist, you're always aware of ethics of people you're interviewing. And if people are especially vulnerable, then you have to make sure they know exactly what they're getting into and you don't take advantage of their vulnerability. So when setting up the interviews, I made it very clear, what sort of questions I'd be asking. They could always say no. How long would they like the interview to be? Half an hour could be a long time for somebody. So we set these ground rules and I made sure they understood what was up.
Mhm.
But it turned out that these people had volunteered a long time ago to be spokespeople
Right.
for the legalization of psychedelics. Talking to me was not their first go at the media very many times and had been chosen because they're confident speakers who do well in situations like that. So
Right.
I never had the feeling that I was actually speaking to someone vulnerable, except occasionally when they said they were a little bit tired and they wanted to end the interview. But generally speaking, they were forceful, confident people. Um, yeah, so I did not feel that they were delicate and had to be handled with kid gloves. I spoke to them to an adult way. I asked tough questions when appropriate, and they answered the tough questions with honor.
I, I've read so many trip reports specifically about uh, end of life anxiety, and it's always fascinates me that the total turnaround that people have. Also, I noticed that you interviewed uh, quite a few CEOs, people who eventually became CEOs of psychedelic uh, companies working on medicines to work in a therapeutic sense. How was that? Did you
Yes.
choose that direction, or did it kind of just happen because these are people that are prominent like Tom Shapiro and
I wanted to talk about the modern world of psychedelics.
mhm,
It seems like so many books that I've read about psychedelics, they're all about, well, Timothy Leary this and Timothy Leary that, and the Doors. And it's like it's of a previous generation, which have been discussed. But right now, in this decade, important things are going on. So I wanted to speak to the contemporary players.
right,
And Laurie Brooks, they're one very important face. They're changing the law. They're the
right,
new face of psychedelics. As a sick person, someone who needs help. So
mhm,
they're very important in that sense. But
mhm,
also very important are the capitalists who see this as a chance to make a buck.
right,
It's social movements can get started by volunteers doing it out of the good term. At least our
right,
society, you need to have
mhm,
some money behind it. You need to have
mhm,
science. You need to have the establishments of the law and science and universities. It needs to
right,
become sort of mainstream. And that's what these entrepreneurs are doing. A lot of them,
totally,
when they first started, psychedelics were more disreputable than they are today. So
right,
some of them risked their reputations to get into this field. And by speaking about it as a business, as a job,
yeah,
I think they know. I spoke to a lot of CEOs, and the ones that whose stories I included in the book often happen to be the ones whose personal stories were quite interesting. I found, there were
exactly,
other CEOs who, I went to business school and then I worked at the pharmaceutical company and then I went to the psychedelic company and
Right.
that's my life. And
Yeah,
I,
they
you
all had a
know,
compelling reason that was so moving. That I saw.
yes,
Addiction or, depression or seeing somebody in your family commit suicide is painful. That will impact you for the rest of your life. Um,
yes.
yeah, they were very moving stories. Like to uh, I like to tell about my own experience. That's because it's such a difficult thing to do. To actually write about a trip, and I like to report others. Do you find that you have that same kind of draw? You're curious about what other people's experiences are as well.
Very much so, in two ways. One, because I believe it shows you interesting insights into an interesting person. These images often reflect things that are going on within the person.
Right.
Thomas Hartle, who's partially autistic or somewhere on the
Right.
spectrum, as they would say, of
Yeah.
all the trips that I read about, in a way, his was the most impersonal. He left personal relationships behind and went to this almost abstract world of galaxies and things like that. When you had a different person, Laurie Brooks, who's
Yeah.
very family, her hallucinations or imagery revolve intensely around family and feelings. So
Right.
two very different people
Right.
taking the exact same drug, taking them in very different directions.
And I was also so impressed with Thomas Hartle's ability to look at all these difficulties with such a like almost like Data from Star Trek, just a neutral tone, not
Yes.
breaking down, not feeling sorry for himself at any point. And I was so impressed by him as just his nobility. Every single person though had a compelling story, which I appreciated learning about. And I wanted to ask you, what kind of advice would you give to advocates here in the United States? I know we're following. I'm doing the part that I can do with legalizing or decriminalizing plant medicines. It's a bill that's going to be introduced for our state in January. I'm just writing about it. I didn't create the bill. I don't know how to really do promotional work or political or anything like that, but I at least know some people who are working that. What would you suggest to them that they should work on here if you have suggestions you think could apply to us?
Sure. Yes, I think that people have stereotypes and associations with a lot of psychedelic drugs. And a lot of that is linked to the culture wars of the 1970s, 1980s, 1960s, when you had the Richard Nixons and the Ronald Reagans on one side, but then you had the Timothy Learys and the, tune out, drop out. And both of those sides, from the point of view of today, are quite unattractive.
Yes.
If you want to discuss psychedelics, it needs to be in a modern way,
Right.
leaving those old associations and baggage behind.
Yes.
No tie-dye shirts, none of connecting. One of the most valuable things is connecting the use of psychedelics to members of society who are highly esteemed. For example, people who are suffering from a terminal illness, their courage is often respected. People who are struggling with mental illness, there's more and more acceptance of people like that. But then also traditional things associated with tough guys, hockey players, ex-soldiers,
Right.
corporate
Exactly.
CEOs who wear suits and ties,
Exactly.
make it so it's, but as something that in some ways is an American as apple pie.
Right. I was struck by that as well. And here I'm in Chicago, so I see Chicago Blackhawks. So cool! I learned about. I know nothing about sports. I
Oh
should
yeah,
know something like this. Oh, Todd Carcillo, he's a big sports
now you
guy.
don't have to.
But I was so impressed with him, his background. I was so moved that I thought, wow, because I think about this a lot every time I see somebody who's been a football player and has had a traumatic brain injury or anything like this to have to go through what they go through. And if you have a solution, please use it. If psychedelics can help, why wouldn't you? So that comes to mind with somebody like him. Um, what drew you to writing
Seconds.
in general? I'm sorry. I think am I freezing or something? Can you still hear me? I may try again. Or okay.
You were freezing,
Yeah, I
yes.
was just freezing.
I can hear you now.
Okay, good. Um, I wanted to ask you an in general question. You were a practicing attorney, and I wondered if you just moved to write, or was this something that you found that I really would rather write about all these different topics that are on my mind, and this is not something I want to do. Uh, um, what was the reason that you were drawn to writing? Is my main question. What drew
Well,
you
I
to
always
writing?
wanted to be a writer. That was always something I wanted to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I always wanted to be a writer to earn a living that way. And
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't imagine it doing, becoming a professional writer straight away. So I
Mm-hmm.
decided to get a university degree of some kind so I'd have a trade to fall back on.
Mm-hmm.
And law became sort of my day job. And so I did that for around 10 years. But all the same time, during the evenings, I was writing and dreaming of a time when I could leave the law behind.
Right.
And then when me and my wife had children, when they were small, I decided that I would be the one who stays home and takes care of them, did writing and taking care of the kids. And then when the kids got older and didn't need as much as me, I just expanded the writing until it became, as it is now, a full-time job. That's all I do now is I've managed to transition to what I always wanted to do, though it took me a couple decades to get here.
That's a great
Mhm.
success story that anybody could relate to. I myself have always wanted to write. I was an English tutor and I did a variety of other work that I did enjoy, but I think I like writing the most of everything I've ever tried. So I can identify with that. Um, are you do you regularly speak to people who are working on advocacy in Canada about specifically magic mushrooms? I don't know if I broke up or froze.
No, I'm quite, I mean, this, this Shroom Boom book has just been released in electronic form just a few weeks ago. And I'm self-publishing it through my own publishing company, as opposed to
Okay.
my previous books. Tip and Trade and Hidden Harvest went through a traditional publisher.
Mm-hmm.
With Hidden Harvest, for a couple years, I was invited to several conferences and debates about cannabis legalization. So I spoke a lot about that before it became legal in Canada.
Okay.
Um, and so I'd be happy to speak about psychedelic issues in the future, but you're the first one to invite me. So
Oh, I'm really great to hear.
well,
Makes me
thank you.
feel glad to hear that because my whole
Mhm.
goal is to, once I found out how much psychedelics have helped me, I said I have to tell everyone. This people have to know about this because
There you go.
I'm what it said. Why not me? I like came out of the closet, I said, so to speak, but about something I don't think I should have to feel ashamed of dealing with depression or dealing with anxiety. I mean, like right now, most everybody is dealing with anxiety, so I just feel like people are like, "What?" And you're not. So, a lot of people are dealing with it. Um, so what is your, if you don't mind talking about it, if your own personal experiences or with yourself or with close relatives or friends? What is your story about your interest in psychedelics?
Well, I've always been interested in the idea of it. And in my youth, I Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. This is all audio, so
Um,
it was a few seconds.
okay, so you'll be, yeah. I don't have any recent personal experience of it.
Hmm.
Um, in my in my youth. So, and in terms of friends and family, mm, basically, I mean, people, I hang around with a lot of musicians and people like that. So I
Hmm.
often come in contact with people who use these things on a recreational basis. And more people I know, I meet socially, will say, oh, I'm microdosing to get more energy or to get more creative. So
Right.
I'm hearing more and more people saying, speaking
Yeah.
openly, oh, I microdose, things like that.
Yeah. I hear that. I.
And just in my social circles, um, using it sort of ceremonially,
Hmm.
um, not just taking some bags and going to the rock concert, but having some
Yeah.
spiritual elements to it and stuff like that.
Yeah. Because to me, that it's a substance. Whether you look at it from just a purely monetary viewpoint, it's serious to you, or if it's a spiritual point of view you have, it's sacred. And for me, these are sacred substances, and I don't want to sit in judgment of anyone else's experience, but it's hard for me to relate to coming away from any magic mushroom or ketamine or even cannabis trip without feeling moved by it. I just, it's hard for me to see it as just, oh, that was a fun, happy night. I
Mm-hmm.
don't, I feel like compelled to write about it, explore it, relive that moment because there's so much to teach me. That's how I look at it. But I mean, I guess everybody, of course, is different. I'm just kind of trying to explain where I'm headed, and that it's a kind of a tightrope walk because you're finding people that just want to be more recreational, and other people who are, some people you kind of similar wavelength with. People who are just fascinated and want to talk about it and don't want to sell anything to you and don't want, you know, there's like kind of a divide there, and I find that kind of difficult in talking about it because to me it is very sacred. In fact, I was agnostic before I ever before trying magic mushrooms, so that's a big shift.
You find it difficult. You found it difficult to.
Sorry, maybe it's. I, can you hear me a little bit better? I said it.
Yes, it froze. It just stopped after you said, "I find it difficult to."
I find it difficult to understand people who don't see psychedelics once they experience them as something that's really moving and serious. That's that's my point. What has been your
No,
experience
I
with?
can totally understand.
Yeah. Do you find that same a similar situation when you're looking to speak to people that you're getting one leaning so much in just the spiritual or so much just in, yeah, that was a great time, or lumping it all together with every other substance.
Yes, I feel there are both. There are some people who see it them to different places and to see themselves in a kind of experience, while
Yeah.
other people look at it more as just a way to escape the regular everyday to day and have an adventure. And
Yeah.
also sometimes people like the fact that they can bond to other people under the experience,
Right.
especially MDMA or ecstasy. People
Right.
often talk about how connected they feel to others. um,
Yeah. That
I find that, yes,
I've heard the same thing. That
and I people, especially a lot of young men,
yeah. Uh, I
and
I hear you must try MDMA. It's a wonderful experience. That kind of sums
yes,
up many. It's just all positive. And I've read about people who've gone through therapy and have overcome real major challenges through working with MDMA and a therapy at the same time. Just got a warning.
Yes, with psilocybin.
Well, I just got a warning from Zoom. So we have like 10 minutes. It gave me that
Okay.
warning cutoff. So I had more questions that I would have liked to have asked. And I also, before we get cut off, because I think it's me. I think I'm having issues. It might be me the whole time. So I would like to ask you about how people can reach you. They're interested in reading your latest book, Shroom
Okay.
Boom, Canada's Psychedelic Pioneers. A place that they could reach you and purchase the books, find out more about what you're doing, what you're doing on Twitter, anything that you would like to talk about.
Sure. And I will get to that in a second,
Oh,
Diane.
sure.
But if when this interview is over, if you have some follow-up questions you'd like to send me by email or by direct message in Twitter, I can answer some follow-up questions, which you could
That's a great idea.
add.
Yes,
It-
absolutely. I'll do
yeah.
that.
Well, I'm a journalist. I do this all the time.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
And if people want to learn more about me,
yes.
if people want to learn more about my books, they're available at markcoakleybooks.com, markcoakleyBooks.com. I have a Twitter account, which is at Mark Coakley Book. And you can also go onto Amazon Kindle.
Okay.
And just search my name, Mark Coakley, and my stuff. If wants to reach out to me, I'd love to hear from them. And you got me started on talking about psychedelics publicly, and I hope this will not be my last talk about the topic, but it was a very good introduction. You're a good interviewer. I really
appreciate it. I would love to talk again about either murder bugs, a love story, because that's intriguing me. I'm a big sci-fi fan and Law and Order, all kinds of X-Files. So I read that description. I will be reading it, and or Hidden Harvest. So at a time that's convenient for you, and I wish you all a really great holiday.
Those are my two best.
Yes, and I wish you a great holiday
Thank you very much
for July. Okay, well, it was so great to talk with you. Thanks for your patience with all my issues here. You take care now.
It's been a pleasure.
Okay.
And I'm subscribed to your newsletter.
Okay, great.
So I'm subscribed to your newsletter. So that would mean that'll tell me when the podcast.
Oh, I will also email you directly.
Or you to read it.
You'll probably get, you don't have to subscribe.
Great.
I mean, I would love to, you did, and I thank you for that. But either way, I'll just, let you know I did it. So I'll be doing this probably by Tuesday. So coming up in
that's great.
3-4 days.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
It was very kind of you to invite me on your show.
Thank you. Take care now.
Have a